were surrounded and had no way out.
Is this the best protection our nation's capital can offer our leaders? We're going 360.
We failed. We did not secure the Capitol.
Plus, new details about 2 Coloradans arrested in D.C.
Why are you recording? You're not allowed to do this.
Democrats proclaim this the 25th hour.
Whatever we can do to remove this man as soon as possible, that's what we should do.
While President Trump admits his time in the White House is coming to a close.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th.
A Denver police officer survives being stabbed several times.
And the Brigadier General in charge of Colorado's vaccine operations briefs us on distribution.
Our biggest constraint is vaccine availability.
We know why this happened. A president with an authoritarian streak called together a group of his most zealous supporters, riled them up, and then retreated to the safe confines of the White House.
And what the nation wants to know right now is how it was allowed to happen. The U.S. Capitol Police Force was clearly understaffed and unprepared. And now 5 people are dead, and among them, a Capitol police officer.
The fallout has been swift. Late this evening, we learned that the chief of police intends to resign and that the initial attempts to provide reinforcements were rebuffed. Denver7's Jason Grenauer begins tonight's 360 coverage.
In Washington, truckloads of fencing arrived and were set up as major questions linger of what went wrong and how this actually happened.
I was absolutely aghast and shocked to see how the security was breached like that.
We start our 360 look with Colorado's local lawmakers who were there. Congresswoman Diana DeGette was inside the chambers as rioters stormed the building and tried to break in.
Oh, we're going to find out what went wrong. We're going to find out what went wrong. But it's obvious to me that it was woefully poor preparation by the Capitol Police.
If this were a military operation that I were a part of, instantly the chain of command would have already been relieved.
Congressman Jason Crow, also inside the chambers at the time, is calling for people's jobs.
The Sergeant at Arms has already tendered his resignation, and that resignation will be accepted. We are encouraging the Chief of the Capitol Police to do the same.
The chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, Stephen Sund, did announce his resignation late Thursday following pressure from members of Congress and his own police union to do so. Earlier in the day, he released a statement defending the department, writing that the force had a robust plan established to address anticipated First Amendment activities. But make no mistake, these mass riots were not First Amendment activities. They were criminal, riotous behavior.
We failed. We did not secure the Capitol.
The former chief of the Capitol Hill Police, Terrence Gaynor, calling out his former department for not being prepared. That police force, according to their website, consists of 2,300 officers and has a $460 million budget.
It's clear to me that the police were outnumbered, and they apparently underestimated the strength and level of violence in that crowd and overestimated their ability to control the crowd.
And in another 360 perspective, the mayor of Washington, D.C., calling on the new Congress to investigate what happened through a bipartisan commission.
To understand the catastrophic security failures that happened at the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
Even though it was D.C.'s mayor who pushed back on the need for federal reinforcements, writing in a public letter earlier in the week that D.C.'s police force was prepared for the week's activities. And finally, to add to all this, CNN is reporting tonight that it was Vice President Mike Pence who finally called in the National Guard to help handle the situation at the Capitol after President Trump initially resisted. I'm Jason Grenauer, Denver7.
His Twitter account freshly unlocked. President Trump just released new video late this evening.
And he urged calm and condemned the actions of his supporters. In a huge break from previous statements, he acknowledged his days as president are numbered.
I continue to strongly believe that we must reform our election laws to verify the identity and eligibility of all voters and to ensure faith and confidence in all future elections. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
And now back to the riots. Much of the country could not help but notice the muted response yesterday's crowd received versus demonstrators reacting to the death of George Floyd.
And President-elect Biden spoke to that today.
No one can tell me that if had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently than the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol. We all know that's true. And it is unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
And there are many obvious differences between the group that showed up yesterday and the people who filled the streets of Denver last summer. As for the response, well, you probably expect police to treat protests outside an unoccupied building differently than a mob storming the U.S. Capitol as our nation's elected leaders gather inside.
And today, Senator Chuck Schumer and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi formally called for Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove President Trump from office. Colorado's Joe Neguse and Ed Perlmutter, they're all on board. Diana DeGette prefers impeachment. She announced this evening that House Democrats will introduce the articles to set that process in motion on Monday.
Whatever we can do to remove this man as soon as possible, that's what we should do. He is dangerous. He is unfit to serve. And I'm frankly, a lot of people say, well, it's 2 weeks. There's a lot of damage, more damage he can do in 2 weeks. We need to remove him as soon as possible, whether it's by another impeachment or whether it's by the 25th Amendment.
If the 25th Amendment were invoked, that would to say that the president is incapacitated. And in my opinion, some of the things that he's done recently are insane, literally insane. And there may be a desire to, at least in these last 13 days, stop these chaotic moves that we see from the president.
Now, at this hour, Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois is the only Republican in Congress to publicly support invoking the 25th Amendment. It is unclear how many would be on board with impeachment.
And 2 Coloradans who traveled to Washington to support the president were arrested this week. Police say both were armed. Denver7's Lance Hernandez with that.
More than 135 people have been arrested so far this week during protests in support of President Trump. 2 Coloradans were among them, one from Frederick, one from Inglewood.
I didn't want to say I knew it, but I definitely had an idea.
Jonathan Flynn and Joseph Black say their neighbor across the street in Inglewood, who works in construction, is a big supporter of the president.
He always has flags. Lots of flags.
They say that neighbor, 34-year-old Stanley Williams, flies the blue law enforcement flag outside his home and normally has Trump and American flags on his pickup. Williams was arrested late yesterday. He's been charged with a curfew violation and possession of a prohibited weapon. Like many of the protesters, Williams apparently went to Washington to voice opposition to Biden winning the electoral count.
I don't think he was too happy about that, so it kind of makes sense.
The other Colorado man arrested, 48-year-old Harlan Bowen of Frederick, has been charged with carrying a pistol without a license, possession of a prohibited weapon, possession of unregistered ammunition, and possession of a large-capacity ammunition feeding device.
What are you doing? Why are you recording? You're not allowed to do this.
Family members declined comment. It is illegal to open carry in Washington, D.C. Gun owners must be licensed to conceal carry. Lance Hernandez, Denver7.
CU Boulder is again distancing itself from a guest professor with fringe views. John Eastman drew the ire of academia last year when he suggested Kamala Harris wasn't eligible to become vice president because her parents weren't born in the U.S. Well, yesterday he addressed Trump supporters in Washington, spinning a yarn that included several absurd claims of mass voter fraud. Well, this evening, CU Chancellor Phil DeStefano called Eastman an embarrassment and said he has contributed nothing of value to support his ideas. DeStefano would clearly like to see Eastman gone. However, because of policy, he will allow him to finish out his term with the university, and that contract expires in May.
And we'd like to know, what were you thinking while you were watching all that yesterday? We want to know. That includes your thoughts on the police response, the comparisons made to protests from last year, and on invoking the 25th Amendment or impeaching the president. Please email us your thoughts, 360@thedenverchannel.com, and we promise to read every response. Vaccine distribution does appear to be improving in Colorado, but even the governor admits we have a long way to go.
Denver7's Addie Guajardo sat down with the man in charge of delivering supplies from point A to point B. And Addie, no surprise here, the main issue is there just are not enough shots to go around.
And it is a very limited supply. For some perspective, Colorado is home to 5.7 million people, and we're roughly receiving about 70,000 vaccines. Now, let's be clear. What we have received is based on a system that calculates the vaccines the U.S. receives and the population in each state. Walgreens and CVS are taking a portion of those shots to get them into the arms of residents and staff at long-term health facilities. So far, they've received 80,000 of 121,000 shots they're tackled with distributing. Now, vaccines at long-term health facilities should be completed by mid-January and no later than January 28th at assisted living facilities. Now, we're also in phase 1B, a task that includes getting shots to Coloradans 70 and older, a population in Colorado of 562,000 people.
Once we get out of the long-term care facility, we are also getting vaccine into the retail pharmacies. That will help increase the vaccine available or the appointments available for the over 70 population. Our biggest constraint is vaccine availability.
Now, federal clinics are also getting those vaccines out to underserved communities. Larger hospitals and public health agencies are setting up those clinics. How many doses each county and each provider receives depends on the requests they put in, availability, and population in that area. Health officials also hope to finish giving those shots out to those people that are 70 or older by the end of February. Now, various counties are also putting up websites where you can go, sign up, and get alerts when it's your turn to get the vaccine. So far, more than 138,000 Coloradans have received the vaccine. More than 5,000 have received that second dose. Reporting live, Addie Guajardo, Denver7.
Addie, thank you very much. Denver Public Schools is now providing students with COVID tests. Students can register online. The test free. They should be processed within 72 hours at most.
The Denver police officer stabbed Wednesday near Federal and 6th Avenue was struck multiple times in the chest and torso. This is according to documents released by the department today. And the suspect, Alicia Esquivel, is being held for investigation of attempted first-degree murder of a peace officer. The officer is expected to live.
Think having your identity stolen is bad? Try getting it back.
You call one person and they tell you to call 2 or 3 other people.
And the Broncos get to work interviewing prospective GMs. First up, Champ Kelly.
Denver's first chance of snow on the map when it will arrive.